So, have you ever thought about English spelling, like deeply? Okay, especially if you're a language enthusiast, you probably already know that English spelling is a mess. It's heavily inconsistent and illogical. And I have made this point in one of my other shorts that I made some time ago. And yeah, this video is going to be explaining that. Why is English spelling such a mess? Real quick, if you like my content, consider liking and subscribing. Helps not only me, but also you. Anyways, yeah, there are a few main reasons why English spelling is like this. But first, a bit of history. Now, English actually did not used to look like this. Okay, it used to look a lot different. Originally, during the time of Old English, it used to be written in runes. However, when Christian missionaries came to Britain a long time ago, they brought them with them the Latin alphabet, and that was this not the start of the Old English period, but yeah, the vast majority of Old English text is written in the Latin script rather than runes. The only time runes are ever used is in inscriptions and other pagan things. But yeah, and for a while, actually, old English scholars actually wrote things phonetically, meaning there was no silent letters. You wrote exactly what you said, and said exactly as you wrote. And English for a time was actually phonetic. The spelling did make sense. However, that would change by the time of Middle English and the end of the Old English period, 1066 by the Norman conquest. That's when English for the first time started gaining French words. Now, you probably already know that the French language is different than the English language, especially in terms of orthography. How French has different spelling conventions than English. And what the problem was that the old English spelling conventions were good and great because they worked for English, but now they did not work for French. So what they did is that, well, half the time they would actually sort of adapt French words into Old English, and at the same time they just import them directly without changing how the word looked. With that being said, the French scribalists also did not like the way Old English sounded and looked and its vocabulary, so they also put a lot of French words into the vocabulary, as well as sort of tweaking English spelling. For example, getting rid of certain characters like Thorn, Ash, and Ez. I might make a separate video on that. And getting rid of all of that to make English look more cleaner. All right, then yeah, Middle English happened, then Early Modern English, and now we have Modern English. And throughout that entire span, many French words, even Latin and German words Latin and Greek words, but there are German words in English that have made it to English via the Renaissance and other time spans, and to what we have today. And yeah, that goes with the first reason that not all words are English. A lot of them come from languages that have their own orthographies, and therefore their spelling system doesn't match with the English's original conventions, and therefore it makes a lot of silent letters and inconsistencies with English. Now, the second reason is that during the printing presses actually. So there's actually two things. So one, English was spelling was being standardized during the Great Vowel Shift, and uneducated people, you could say, was tampering with the printing presses. So the Great Vowel Shift in English is a time between around the Middle Ages to early modern English where the pronunciation of vowels drastically changed. For example, the word beat became bait, then bite. And then, yeah, a lot of things like that where a lot of vowels would change significantly. And unfortunately, this was the time of the printing press as well. So what we have now with modern English words is actually their Middle English spelling that we pronounce with modern English pronunciation. And with the printing presses, okay, there were a lot of people working on them. Okay, for example, the Dutch. Now, the Dutch spelling system is, of course, different. like any language that uses the the Latin alphabet. And yeah, as they were using the English printing presses, they were confused on how English words would sound. So a lot of the times they would put silent letters unknowingly, thinking that's how English worked. For example, they're the reason that there's an H in ghost. It originally was not there, but yeah, people who didn't know better put it there. Now, speaking of putting things there, there's another reason that's like this. The French, you could say showing off their own knowledge. Now, some English words, for example, doubt, is not, it's spelled with a B, not because that's how it was originally pronounced, doubt, but because French spellers at the time wanted to flex how they knew Latin debitum. So they put, wait, no, not debitum. The original word was dubitare, which means to doubt. Okay, and you can see it has a B in there. But when the French got it and when it evolved, it became doot. And in Middle English, it was doot until the French spelling reformers put a B in there to show that they knew where it came from. And this shows up in a lot of other things. For example, debt is also another one. Those are a lot of the main reasons why English spelling doesn't make sense. Yeah, well, yeah, and finally, just loan words in general. Okay, English is the lingua franca, so it, like gets a lot of words from a lot of different places, a lot of different languages, a lot of different cultures, etc. And because English already is inconsistent, those languages have their own, yeah, modes of transliteration. For example, I know, in in the Middle East, okay, especially with modern standard Arabic, a long E sound is transliterated as two I's. However, in the Indian transliterated system, a long E is transliterated into Latin as two E's. Okay? So you see things like that crop up across the world, as well as just, as I said, loan words where different languages with their own sound systems need to translate it into English, so they do so, while at the same time making English less and less consistent over time. Now, so you might also be thinking, well, if English is so inconsistent, why haven't we fixed it yet? And that is a good question. And unfortunately, the reason why English spelling can't really be fixed up till now is a few key reasons. One of the main reasons is that there is no governing authority for English. For example, for other languages, you have the Academy of French, the Spanish Academy, the Germans also have an institution where it's not just that they make dictionaries, but they govern the entire language. They institute the reforms, they institute how things are supposed to be spelled, etc. Okay. Now, English does technically have like things like this, but they're not necessarily regulators. For example, Oxford University, they don't really govern the English language, they just document the English language as it changes, hence the Oxford English Dictionary. Now, there have been attempts to reform English, especially try to make an authority, but they all didn't work because English is based on a principle of freedom, and I mean, yeah, it's based on well, it's not like all English speakers think of freedom, but English is sort of like that. As you can see, it doesn't hesitate to borrow all sorts of words. And at the end of the day, not to mention just how widespread English is, it would be extremely hard to get everyone on the same boat to how to pronounce things. Not to mention the amount of English media that would need to be changed. Like, if we instituted a spelling reform, like every single book, every single like piece of media would need to be changed, which would cost so much money and so much time, and at the end of the day, it's just not worth it. So, yeah, those are the main reasons why English spelling is bad, and English spelling can't really be. I mean, See, English spelling can be fixed. It's just incredibly difficult compared to other languages. So, yeah, as you said, these are the reasons why English spelling doesn't make sense. And yeah, why English spelling is incredibly difficult to fix.